Nothing is more difficult than to clear one's mind about a subject concerning which there is general confusion. It is like trying to salvage one's belongings while the house is on fire, as I know from bitter experience. Apparently, some readers are not clear about my objections to referring to Israel as the circumcision and to Gentiles as the uncircumcision. And various comments have been brought home to me that I have not yet been sufficiently explicit, and that at least some of the things I have written call for correction. I can only express my regret and try again. That sort of difficulty constantly arises when thinking afresh about some familiar topic. As Mr. A. Enoch pointed out years ago in discussing figures of speech, the literal leads. We must always take a scripture expression literally unless the context compels us to take it as a figure. This is absolute, admitting of no exceptions whatsoever. If only everyone would remember that rule and act on it, most of the difficulties and often bitter controversies would settle themselves. Circumcision is the sign of covenant. Uncircumcision is the absence of that sign. These are the literal meanings and therefore the leading ones, so we must not depart from them unless the context demands it. What I wrote about Ephesians 2, 11 through 18 in volume 17, pages 255 through 257, still appears to me to stand, except for two corrections. In Ephesians 2:11, the Greek tes legomenes peritomus is genitive feminine singular, not plural. The insertion of one into a feminine phrase is wrong, and a neuter rendering is undesirable. Read, by the so-called circumcision in flesh, hand makeable. This form demands some entity, characterized by circumcision, which can be done by hand and is not of heart. Romans 2:29, Colossians 2:11, who terms Gentiles in flesh as a class of individuals uncircumcision. The term is not the uncircumcision, so this text can hardly be regarded as an adequate authorization for us to write and speak of the uncircumcision, as so many repeatedly do. It does not deny that the individual who had the circumcision in flesh, hand makeable, termed the Gentile uncircumcision, but it certainly cannot be adduced as commending the practice. In Acts 10:45 and 11:2, Galatians 2:12, Titus 1:10, we do not read of the circumcision, but of hoi ek peritomus, literally the ones out of circumcision, a special expression which I have already discussed very fully. So far as I can discover, nobody has yet upset the conclusion then reached. Read the circumcisionists. In Romans 4:12, it is similarly not to the circumcisionists only. The first occurrence in this verse should be rendered, and father of circumcision, are and circumcision father, according to taste. There is no "the" here. In Romans 15:8, it is similarly servant of circumcision, or circumcision servant, again without any "the." In Galatians 2:7 and verse 8, the literal can lead perfectly satisfactorily. The literal can lead perfectly satisfactory, and there is no need to introduce a figurative class here, or in either of the two occurrences. The individual who continues to oppose me in this matter omits, for obvious reasons, to mention Romans 2:26. Now, here Paul certainly does personify the uncircumcision, as I pointed out quite plainly in the Differentiator, volume 15, number 2, page 58. The 1930 Concordant version makes a howler in verse 27 by rendering Ielousa, singular. I'll spell that, Ielousa, that's the Greek. By, are discharging, But I wish to say that I do not regard this blunder as a deliberate perversion of the text. Evidently, the compiler was led astray by the too common practice among us of calling the Gentiles the uncircumcision, so that his mind unconsciously led him to use a plural verb. Let us not judge him, but be warned ourselves. These two verses are singular throughout and should read, if then the uncircumcision person should be maintaining the righteous standards of the law, shall not that uncircumcision of his be accounted for circumcision? And the by nature uncircumcision person, discharging the law, shall be judging thee, though through letter and circumcision, a transgressor of law. A curious feature of all this is that in the places where these words are plainly personified, it is always with reference to the individual, except where in Ephesians 2:11, the individual who has the circumcision names all Gentile men uncircumcision. So I remain completely unconvinced by any pleas that Scripture entitles us to write of Israel as the circumcision, or the Gentiles as the uncircumcision. Why should we want to anyhow when we already have Israel and Gentiles? Not only does it introduce confusion where none existed, but it seems so far-fetched and unnecessary. Finally, I would like to explain why I found myself compelled to write so much about what is in every passage but one a rather minor matter. The reason is that in one place, Galatians 2:7 and 8, it is not a minor matter. This is rarely seen if we write instead of what Paul actually wrote. But on the contrary, perceiving that I have been entrusted with the evangel of the Gentiles, according as Peter of the Jews, for he who operates in Peter unto apostleship of Israel operates in me also unto the Gentiles. There must have been some sufficient reason why Paul preferred to write, but on the contrary, perceiving that I have been entrusted with the evangel of the uncircumcision, according as Peter of the circumcision, for he who operates in Peter until apostleship of the circumcision operates in me also unto the Gentiles. I submit that the reason is quite simple. This is what Paul meant. It was the sign of circumcision itself which was the point at issue, not Jews versus Gentiles. For a Jew could and sometimes did abandon his covenant standing, either on account of unbelief or because he elected to follow Paul into a new creation, and the Gentile could abandon his uncovenanted position by becoming a proselyte. But circumcision itself cannot be done away with or abolished.